Yeah, that's my background. That's where I've spent most of my career is in mostly B2B SaaS tech companies. I find that's what often comes my way, but I've also run customer service teams in like B2C environments as well. So my work is really, I have for sure. I think those types, it's difficult to really get into the weeds as a consultant. And I know that especially in these economic times, folks are maybe less willing to have someone come in like 3, 4 days a week for a number of months to like really dive deep and understand the business so that I'm actually able to produce that stuff. I've done it before and I enjoy doing it, but I also acknowledge that completely. I mean, I always say to my coaching clients, and I think this applies to the consulting as well, but as a coach, at least, I always say that I am in the passenger seat and you are in the driver's seat, and we are on the highway of your life.
Okay, here we go. Joining me today is Lauren Wood, CX consultant and leadership coach and podcast coach out of Los Angeles. And she helps tech become more human, which I think is interesting because, of course, we're all human, but tech maybe not so much.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Thanks so much, Karl. Excited to be on the show.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate you taking the time and all. So just to start off, do you want to maybe explain a little bit about your company that you're involved with? So your Lauren Wood company.
Of course. I couldn't come up with a really snazzy name for it, but in essence, what I do is a number of different things. I'm a leadership coach, I'm a customer experience consultant, I facilitate workshops with teams, and I'm the host of a podcast called Experts of Experience. So my work really revolves around the intersection between the company, the team, and the customer. And so when my LinkedIn headline says helping tech become more human, that really comes from the fact that having built and led client facing teams in a number of different tech companies, I can get into my background in a moment, but in doing that work, what I've realized is that at its essence, when we want to create great customer experiences, we have to start with our teams. And we also need to acknowledge that there's humans all the way down the line. It can be really easy for us to look at our customers as a number or a metric and to really focus on our teams hitting a number and a metric, which all makes sense. But we lose the plot if we don't acknowledge that these are actually humans supporting humans. And we also have human needs. So that's really what my work revolves around.
Nice. That's awesome. Um, so and you're also full time in a nonprofit. Is that right?
Uh, Not anymore. Which one are you referencing?
Okay, not anymore. No. I saw that on your profile here.
Mm. Yeah, I've in my past I've worked with a number of different nonprofits. Typically, it was as I was working in big hypergrowth unicorn tech companies, I needed to have something else to really fill my purpose cup. And so I've worked with a number of different nonprofits, predominantly in the art and climate spaces and kind of the intersection of the two, which are passion points for me. But at the moment, I'm more focused on my own business and hosting a podcast.
Great. So that all that has helped you get to where you are and find the focus that you have. Then I guess. So anyway, I guess those experiences helped you find the focus that you have now. I mean, what got you started on the whole thing when you first, you went to school for was it CX consulting school you went to or what? How do you start with it?
Yeah, I went to well, I my career. really started when I when I was in school, but even before that. I've always kind of approached education as I know I learn better by doing. So I went to school for a Bachelor of Business Management, focused on marketing, and really wanted to be working in the marketing space because I loved the ability to bring creativity and business together. But I quickly found myself managing clients in agencies. And then I moved on to tech companies where I was also managing clients. And essentially my entire career, which is close to 15 years now, has always been me sitting at the intersection of the company and the customer, and predominantly in B2B SaaS and running client facing teams. So customer success. Um, and through this work, through the number of different companies that I've worked at, I've grown and led large teams and been fortunate enough to work at, well-funded startup companies. And in building and leading teams while also being responsible for the customer relationship, it just became so abundantly clear to me that in order to create an engaged customer that is excited about our product and wants to use it more, we need to have a team that is even more engaged about the product and even more engaged in their role so that they can then go and help those customers. And so that's really where leadership comes into play. We cannot create great customer experiences without creating great leaders. And we need to have the environment where people can really thrive. And that really starts at the top. And so that's where my work in leadership coaching really came about. I was more recently the head of customer success at a company called Too Good To Go, which is a global surplus food marketplace. I had about 25 people on my team that were customer success managers as well as customer service. And I loved the role of being a leader, and I loved the role of coaching the managers on my team. And eventually I just said, I'm going to go off and do this on my own and focus more predominantly on supporting leaders in doing the great work that I know that they're capable of, but how do we empower them to do so so that they can then empower others?
Nice. Awesome. So, how many people do you have helping you now? You have people on your team and all?
At the moment, I mean, it depends on what I'm working on. So, with the podcast, I'm fortunate enough to have an amazing production team. We're sponsored by Salesforce, so we also have a lot of support from Salesforce in what we do. And then, when it comes to my coaching and consulting business, that's pretty much myself. But of course, I get to work with lots of amazing people in my clients. And the way that I approach my work is I'm really partnering with a business. I become a part of their team temporarily, but a part of their team nonetheless, and really help them think through what is it that we can be doing to improve our customer relationship. And in order to do that, what do we need to do internally to really create the environment that enables our team to thrive in providing the customer relationship that we desire.
Right. Right. Awesome. So, is it predominantly tech companies then that you work with?
Yeah, that's my background. That's where I've spent most of my career is in mostly B2B SaaS tech companies. I find that's what often comes my way, but I've also run customer service teams in like B2C environments as well. So my work is really, or my clients are really people who understand and want to improve the relationship between the employee and the customer and really take that holistic approach that comes from the inside out.
Nice. Okay. So, if I were a tech company and I were looking for help in this area, I mean, what does an engagement typically look like with, how does it work when you get started with a company?
Mhm. Yeah, so there's three different ways of working with me, and I'll start with the maybe lowest touch to the highest touch. Lowest touch is workshops. So I have a number of different workshops that I run with companies that range from customer journey mapping to figure out what are all the touch points that we want to create for a customer? How do we create opportunities for growth with those customers and minimize friction points? I also do workshops on trust building, both internally and externally. So, how do we build trust with our teams and our colleagues? How do we build trust with our customers? Because trust ultimately speeds things up and increases revenue. And I also have workshops on cross functional communication and collaboration. I think one of the key things in any workplace is how are we working with our counterparts? How are we communicating and making sure that we're moving forward effectively? So that's the first point is workshops that I facilitate and design. The second is leadership coaching. So I often work with leaders who are client facing leaders, for example, heads of or directors of customer success or customer experience or customer service. I've also worked with some people in product or marketing. Um, any leader that runs a team who is ambitious and wants to build a more trusting team that can then go ahead and reach their goals, but do so in a way that brings joy into that leader's life. And so I work with leaders in that context, and my coaching often takes a combination of coaching and advisory. I've worked in a number of different startup companies. I've built and led client facing teams. I've been in their positions. So while I'm coaching people through potentially the blocks that they're feeling or the things that are feeling uncomfortable in their roles or uncomfortable as they work towards their goals, I'm also helping to advise on what are some tactical things that you can do that are going to help you to get there. So it's very much action based coaching, but really acknowledging the leader as a human as part of a team. It's not only do this and that, we also need to understand what's causing you to respond in the way that you are. And so I really take a holistic coaching approach. And then the third way of working with me is through consulting. So I will go into organizations and work with them to improve an element of their customer experience. Typically, I am coming in when there is a customer experience leader in place and someone who I'm really collaborating with and working with to define what are the key projects that we need to act on in order to improve that customer experience and the employee experience that will deliver on that customer experience. Because again, those two things really go hand in hand. So, for example, what that might look like is rolling out a feedback process, both externally and internally. How are we collecting information and feedback from our customers as well as our teams? What do we do with that? What process are we running to follow up with it? And then what actions are we taking as a result of that feedback? And then we may say we need to create playbooks so that everyone on our team understands this is what we need to do in order to provide an exceptional customer experience. And that also goes back to that employee experience because when we create clarity for our teams and they know what they need to do to drive the result, everything happens faster, trust is built, and people are happier in the process. And that then, of course, passes on to the customer. So, those are kind of the three ways that I work with my clients: workshops, coaching, as well as longer term consulting arrangements.
Awesome, great. And I mean, do you get really into the weeds with the consulting as far as I know, like a company intranet page or the portal is those are high touch points and can frequently become really convoluted for companies. I mean, have you gone in and tackled a great big huge mess like that and straightened it out?
I have for sure. I think those types it's difficult to really get into the weeds as a consultant, and I know that especially in these economic times folks are maybe less willing to have someone come in like 3 4 days a week for a number of months to like really dive deep and understand the business so that I'm actually able to produce that stuff. I've done it before and I enjoy doing it, but I also acknowledge that typically there are people on the team that know better than I do around how the business actually works. And so I'm really there to help create structure, accountability, and focus so that we know what we're working towards and we're not wasting time in the process of doing it. I also am lucky enough to work with a number of different companies and have a lot of experience seeing how different businesses work. And so I can bring insights and best practices collected in through those experiences to the table so that my clients can also be learning new ways of working in the process.
Nice, nice. It sounds like you really partner well with these teams so you're not stepping on toes and really lifting everybody up.
hmm Well, this is the thing is the teams that are facing the client, the people who speak to the client day in and day out, they are truly the ones that know best. And what I really like to do when I go into an organization is acknowledge that fact because it's often that the leader of the team who is not interfacing with customers is burdened with, or maybe burdened is the wrong word, but they're responsible for creating the strategy and for creating the solutions. And it's very time consuming to come up with solutions when you're not intimately aware of the problem. And the people that know the problem are the customer success managers, the customer support associates, the people who are day in and day out interfacing with that customer. And so that's also where my facilitation work always comes into play is how do we facilitate really engaging and informative conversations that pull that information that they are gathering all day into concise and actionable points that teams across the company can then go and act on. So I truly believe it's the folks who are interfacing with the customer day in and day out who really know the best. Recently, I was interviewing the president of customer success at Salesforce on my podcast, Jim Roth. And he liked to talk about leadership as an inverted triangle, where at the top of the triangle is the people who are interfacing with the customer every day. And he is at the absolute bottom of this inverted triangle, where he's just supporting the rest of it. And I really like that approach to leadership. And I think that especially in customer facing teams like customer service and customer success and customer experience, and even sales or at times product who has to really think about the customer. When we consider ourselves as leaders as at the bottom of the inverted triangle, and our role is to support everyone else in giving everything they have to those customers and do so with a smile on their face, that is really where we get into effective customer experience and profitable businesses. If we want to be successful in the long run, I really truly think that we need to be thinking this way because trust with customers is something that is our greatest asset, and we need to nurture that all the way.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, do any great examples come to mind that maybe of clients that you've worked with that um, you've really made great strides or had a great impact with?
Sure. Let's see. There's a number of them. I'm not going to mention client names just for the sake of their privacy, but I recently worked with a company that works in the health tech space, and they support doctors with technology. So it's a SaaS product for doctors' offices, and they had had some really great success in bringing on some amazing doctors. The product was still being worked on. So, really, the most important thing that they had was their client facing team and their ability to support and provide services to the doctor's offices that they are servicing. And in that, when I got brought on, they were getting some pretty not great feedback from their customers, these doctors' offices, around how their customer support team was actually supporting them. So I went in, first thing I did was get feedback, listen to the teams. I interviewed every single person that was working with those clients to understand what is really happening here. The second thing that I did is I built out a number of training programs. It was very abundantly clear that there hadn't really been great expectations set or training as to how they wanted these teams to interface with their clients. So we did some training programs, and we also noticed that we needed a consistent way of reinforcing good behavior and providing feedback for less than ideal behavior. So we built out a system where the manager could then go through a quality assurance process that was efficient for them, but also help their team to really understand if they were doing something right or if they had some room to improve. And the results there were that the issues disappeared. I did interviews with all of the doctor's offices, or not all of them, but many of their clients. And in the 3 months that I was working with them, they went from saying, like, there's some big problems here, to, okay, we feel like we're on the right track. We feel like we're being really supported. I can give another example too of some workshops that I've done. So, customer journey mapping is one of my absolute favorite things to do. And I highly encourage every business to do this. I find typically it is done in product teams, for product teams to understand, okay, what is the flow that someone is going to go through when they come to our website, or they're in our tool. But outside of just the product team, we also need the client facing teams to do this as well, and for every team in the company to get on board with it. So I was recently doing a customer journey map for a company, actually also in the medical space. And when we went through this customer journey map, which is a 1-day workshop, we realized that there were some pretty big gaps in their customer onboarding. And they were wondering, why is it that, further down the line in this customer journey, we have customers who are really unengaged. They're not really using our product. They aren't really caring. And this is a big issue. We just spent all this money acquiring them, and now they're not really using it. So where's the gap? And within 2 hours of doing this customer journey map, we realized that the information that we were sending them in the onboarding process wasn't really setting the customer up for success. And so that gave us some really clear direction on where the team should be focused to improve that onboarding, so that the customer has more longevity with this tool and can actually get the most out of it. So those are a couple of different examples for how I go in and work with companies on a consulting capacity.
Wow, that's amazing. So and that was just a little bit of information at the right place that needed to be and put into the process, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, in the coaching world, it's really amazing, having been coaching for some time now, I'm just always so amazed by how, where attention goes, energy flows. And by putting attention on specific areas, whether it is in our business or in our lives, we can then drive results purely by just saying, we care about this and we want to improve it. And that's really the approach that I take in all of my work, is helping to highlight where those gaps are in people's lives and business, so that we can then work to improve it with clarity. Because it's often that we're like, oh, there's this problem and I don't understand why this thing isn't working. But if we can take a step back, and it's very hard to do this on our own, to push ourselves to take the step back, it's much easier to have someone else who's like, all right, let's just like zoom out for a moment. I'm going to ask you some questions to guide your brain to think about where these gaps are in your life and your business. And then we can start getting into the action items. But with myself, like, this is the reason why I became a coach, because when I got a coach for the first time, I was like, oh, I haven't actually been taking a step back. I haven't actually been zooming out to the master plan of my life and understanding that I'm trying to go this direction, but the actions that I'm taking here are not actually guiding me to that place. And so, yeah, I think I like to be that support for people.
Yeah, so it's like looking at the overall process from end to end and working out the knots and the kinks and sort of the bottlenecks, I guess.
Completely. I mean, I always say to my coaching clients, and I think this applies to the consulting as well, but as a coach, at least, I always say that I am in the passenger seat and you are in the driver's seat, and we are on the highway of your life. And you know where you want to get to. You're like, I'm going to the Rocky Mountains because, like, that's the dream, and I know what that looks like. I can feel it. And maybe you don't know what it looks like. Maybe it's cloudy and we need to like figure out what the map looks like first. And then once we start driving, there's left turns and there's right turns and there's debris on the road and there's a storm or a flood, and we need to figure out which is the right direction in this moment that also aligns with the ultimate goal. And a coach is there to help you really find that alignment in yourself so that you can make the best decision for you. And yeah, so that's one of my favorite analogies about coaching, because I think sometimes people think like, oh, you're going to tell me advice or you're going to tell me what to do. And like going back to how I said that I coach, where I do provide some advisory services within my coaching, but really I'm helping people to see what it is that they need. And if they have a question that they can't answer, I'm there to provide some answers.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right on. Yeah. I like to say that I don't look for yeses. I look for decisions, and I help people make decisions. There's there's no failure. There's just different outcomes.
Totally. Exactly. And it's so easy for people to think of undesirable outcomes or not their first choice of an outcome to be a failure. And I always wonder, like, why are we preconditioned to just think that, like, if something doesn't go right, it's a failure? It's so not true. If we look at every element of our lives that don't go the way we want them to and we think of them as failures, it kills our self-esteem. Really what it is they're opportunities for learning, and they're us going out on a limb and trying something that didn't work, which is natural. That is part of life. And again, where I found so much value in coaching is having someone to remind me of that I'm not wrong for doing something that didn't work out the way I thought. When I made that decision, I did it to the best of my abilities. And now I have better abilities because I've been through more stuff. So, yeah, be kind to yourself.
Totally. Totally. Or I like to think that every failure is tuition to success. So you got to pay all the tuition to get to where you want to be.
100%. And I mean, I think, the other day I was talking to a friend who's building a house in Costa Rica, which is no small feat. And he's also a developer. So he knows how to build homes. And some things went wrong. And he was like, oh, it was a $400,000 education that I'll take to the next property I build in Costa Rica. And I was like, ouch, that is a really steep lesson. But he was cool with it. And he wasn't like beating himself up for it. And fact of the matter is like he is going to take that lesson and apply it somewhere else. And he's more focused on what is he going to do with this lesson than being brought down and wallowing in the pain of a $400,000. I don't even want to say it was a mistake. It was just like didn't go as planned, because that's what happens when you're building a house. And he very much knew that. And it really stood out to me because I was like questioning, like, could I be okay with this? Because like, that's a lot of money. But at the end of the day, it's not worth your time to wallow over spilled milk.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's the whole experience too. You have that experience, and then you can use that, go out and probably make way more than that. So no point in worrying. So, what are you excited about this year coming up? You have big projects. I mean, I know you have the podcast is going great. You said.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of projects that we are working on. So the podcast has been so much fun. We just launched it in November, actually. And I haven't looked at the stats today, but a couple days ago, we were the 14th top business podcast on Apple Podcasts. So it's been growing really well, and I'm so excited about that. And we have many more like incredible guests that are coming on the show. And the more we do it, the more awareness we have and the more people who are wanting to come on and talk to us, which is great. And I'm also working on turning some of the content that I'm learning in the podcast into a newsletter. So providing people with some written content as well that really take the things that I'm hearing from the leaders and bringing on the show around leadership and customer experience, and putting that into a written newsletter, which has always been a dream of mine. And so we're finally making that happen, which is great. I'm also working on building out the different workshops that I have to offer. I mean, I have made a number of customized, totally bespoke workshops for companies, but then I also recognize that sometimes there's a need to just like have someone in, run the playbook that works, and help educate the teams and make some improvements. So I have a lot of ideas for different things that I have been teaching that I want to go deeper into. So really building out those types of things.
That's all your curriculum, huh? You write all that stuff out?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really a combination of the books I read, the people I speak to, the experiences that I've had myself. Um, and again, all in the spirit of making tech more human, helping to really engage people in their job. Like, we spend so much time at work. We spend our most of our days working, and it is really my mission to make that an enjoyable experience and something that fills people's cups instead of drain it. And the more we can do that, also the better off the businesses tend to be. So yeah, curriculums that I'm building around topics that lead to that happiness in the workplace. Yeah, I'm excited to roll some of those new things out. And I'm also really focused on my coaching practice at the moment. I love helping leaders one on one, and yeah, it's something I'm growing and putting more effort into. I think it's been something that I've always done as it's kind of like a portion of my work, but I'm starting to make that a bigger focus.
Nice. Awesome. So, if people want to find out more, I know it says your website is laurenwood.co. Is that the best place to go and find you?
Head over there. Head over there. I'm working on it at the moment to make some adjustments, but the all the info's there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My name's Lauren Wood, which is probably a relatively common name, but you could also search Experts of Experience, which is the podcast that I host, and find me there too. So if anyone wants to chat with me about anything that you've heard here today, feel free to DM me, or go over to my website and you can just click the contact button to get in touch.
Nice. Awesome. Great. Well, do you have, is there anything else maybe you wanted to add for today, or do you have other questions?
Um, let's see. I always finish my podcast by asking guests what is one piece of customer experience advice that every customer experience leader should hear. But considering the fact that this is about, well, this podcast is predominantly interviewing coaches. Am I right in that?
I interview marketers and lots of different people. Yeah.
Lots of different people? Okay, well, I'll say this. I'll ask myself and answer my own question. What is one piece of advice that every leader should hear? My one piece of advice that every leader should hear is that it starts with you and focusing on yourself, resourcing yourself, sleeping, eating, exercise, having fun. Those are essential components to you being able to show up for the other people that you work with and the people who are relying on you to lead the way. If you can resource yourself and you can take time to think about how you're approaching things, and if you're approaching it in a way that's aligned to how you want to show up in the world, everyone else around you will benefit from it. I find it so often that leaders are like, I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to like get lunch. I am in meetings all day. It is essential that you resource yourself so that you can show up for other people.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. That's such a good way to put it too. You're exactly right. I'm,
It is. And I've learned that lesson the hard way. I've burnt out. I've been put in the hospital because of it. I've, pushed myself to the limits because that's what I thought needed to happen. And it wasn't until I started focusing on me that I actually became a better leader. I got more promotions. I reached my goals. It all starts with you.
yeah,
So,
people think it's selfish
mhm.
almost.
And it's not.
Right?
It's really not. It's
Mhm.
selfish not to, is how I
Mhm.
think of it.
Yeah, yeah, it's very true. Well, thanks so much for taking the time with me today, Lauren.
Of course.
Really appreciate it. We should catch up again soon.
Yep.
Maybe another show.
Definitely.
Always
Really,
welcome.
really appreciate the time. Thanks so much for having me.